Our next presentation is a presentation with Tobi Kahn and Rabbi Ysoscher Katz. Both of them explored the probing questions of the temple procedures, the temple sacrifices. I'll let them explain their presentation for themselves, but first we have Tobi Kahn, who's a painter and sculptor whose work has been shown in over 40 solo exhibitions and over 60 museums group shows since he was selected as one of 9 artists to be included in the 1985 Guggenheim Museum exhibition, New Horizons in American Art. Works by Kahn are in major museums, corporate and private collections. Rabbi Ysoscher Katz received ordination in 1986 from Rabbi Yecheskel Roth, Dayan of UTA Satmar. Rabbi Katz studied in Brisk and in Yeshivat Beit Yosef Nevardok for over 10 years. A graduate of the Hashar program for Jewish educators, Rabbi Katz has taught at the Mayonot Yeshiva High School for girls and SAR High School. He was a leading teacher of Daf Yomi class in Borough Park for over 8 years, and he was also the rabbi of the Prospect Heights Shul in Brooklyn, and currently the Talmud department chair at Yeshivat Chovevei Torah. Rabbi Ysoscher Katz and Tobi Kahn, without further ado, the stage is yours.
Well, Ysoscher, you're a rabbi, so you go first. Even though we're both Kohanim, and I love duchening with you on Yom Tov, you are a rabbi, so you do go first. So you
sure. Now I'm just going to do a short, brief introduction and then let you speak. I think that it's more important to hear about your work. I'm just going to speak in general because I was fortunate enough to have 2 artists, both of whom worked on Parshiyot in the book of Leviticus and the book of Vayikra. And I would think that for many people, being stuck with the study of sacrifices and the study of the temple wouldn't be necessarily such an exciting thing. As it happens, I happen to love the study of sacrifices. I am a Kohen, that's true, but I love the study of sacrifices, not necessarily because I'm looking forward to the day when I can slaughter animals, but more importantly, because I think that we missed the point of what the temple was and what sacrifices were by getting stuck and bogged down by focusing on the actual slaughtering piece of all of that. Because to me, the slaughtering is really the smallest piece of what the temple is all about. In fact, I like to say, and I believe it, that in some ways, a temple Jew was an extremely psychologically aware Jew, because without getting into the details, there is a very specific breakdown of sacrifices. You know, when you do a sin, there is 2 or 3 types of korbanot that you bring for sin offerings. Then there are thanks offerings, which also have 2 or 3 types. And the ability to live a life where you're aware of the nuances of, oh, this was this kind of transgression, this was that kind of transgression, or I'm this kind of thankful versus that kind of thankful, or I'm this happy or that joyous. That kind of, cultivates a very robust psychological awareness of your spiritual temperature, so to speak. So, whether we have the korbanot or not, the idea that you woke up every morning knowing, did I do a chatat, which is the name of one of korbanot transgression, or did I do asham transgression, kind of cultivates and inculcates a certain kind of spiritual and religious awareness, which I think was incredible. That's number one. And the last thing I'm going to say before I give the floor to Tobi is that I deeply, deeply believe that we confuse the means and the end when we study sacrifices. We normally think of the temple as the means, the kind of home where we brought the sacrifices. So it was just kind of a home, a structure, an edifice where we were able to bring the korbanot. I think it's the other way around. I think the purpose was the edifice. If you think of the parshiot preceding Vayikra, the Torah goes into such nitty-gritty detail about the building of the Beit HaMikdash, and it's also quite ostentatious and beautiful and elaborate. And then when we get to Shlomo, Shlomo adds to the art of the Beit HaMikdash. I think the Beit HaMikdash was a proto-museum where people came to be taken into that space where aesthetics takes us, right? Aesthetics takes us into a kind of zone where we are not on a daily basis, where we're not on a regular basis. And that's what we go to for museums. We go to a museum to kind of take us into that transcendent place. And I think the korbanot were merely a means to bring us to the temple so that we can bask in the beauty and the aesthetics of the temple and then go into those spaces that art takes us into. So I really appreciate Devere giving me the opportunity to work with two incredible artists, Tobi, and then we'll talk later about Jeffrey also, and both of whom allowed me to further explore temple sacrifices and korbanot. So Tobi, take it away.
Well, first of all, it was an honor to work with you, and Devere, thank you for making that connection. I agree with most of what you said, which is
That's a lot.
That's a lot, but there are certain things I don't. But let me talk about what you said first that I loved. So anyone who knows my work, I've been creating sacred spaces since I was in undergraduate school at Hunter College in the 70s. And I did my first piece. In fact, that's how I got a full scholarship to Pratt Graduate School. I made an installation called Poles for the Dwelling. And it was based on the outside section of, right outside the Kadosh Kadoshim, of how the poles came together. And I also did a huge installation. And if anyone sees the film, there's a short film that the filmmaker Susan Dreyfus did 2 years ago. And you'll see me in my studio with this huge art piece that I was working on. And that was a Mizbeach. And it was, it was much bigger than I was. And it covered my entire studio. And people say, do you still have it? And I said, I couldn't have paid for the storage. And I had to take it apart and use the elements for other pieces that I made later. But I do agree with you 1,000%. When people say to me, you're Jewish and how come your Judaism is so much about aesthetics? And I say, what other religion? I do love the Sistine Chapel. I do like the ceiling. I have different things to say about everything, but thinking about what the Kruvim look like and thinking about what the Mizbeach was like and how you held the Aron Kodesh, and even you held an Aron Kodesh that had the broken luchos in it. To me, if you read the New York Times, which I do read, I know some people don't, but I still read it and I'm fascinated. There was a few weeks ago, they talk about how Cycladic art is becoming a huge influence. And in fact, the Met has made an agreement with Greece to have some of those pieces on display. And when I started teaching at the Masifta, when I was in my 20s, I always would start my lectures at the Met in the Cycladic room, because I talked about the fact that those little sculptures, that was the same time as, it's over 5,000 years ago. And it was very similar to what we were doing as a people at the same time. So Ysoscher, I love that you mentioned that going to the temple was like going to a museum. The only thing I don't agree with that is I think it's more like a sacred space. And I like that the elements in the Mishkan were elements. It was not separate from the experience. It was the experience. And when you go to a museum, it's usually artifacts in a building rather than part of the building. And that's why I love, I always think to myself, when we talk about who Betzalel was, and Betzalel means in the shadow of God, that to me is like, oh my God, I love that. I mean, I never wanted to be Moshe or Aaron or Miriam. I would love, if I had to pick a character in the Torah, the idea of talking about aesthetics with God, like, oh, you can't beat that. So thank you for bringing that up. As far as korbanot goes, I said that when you and I did the program together that day, that I really want to think about who the korbanot, I want to think about the animals that gave of themselves so that, we could be cleansed. I want to talk about the plants that gave of themselves. And I want to look at everything, not from a human point of view, but from the sacrifices themselves. So if anyone wants to come, I have a solo museum show opening in Long Island on November 20th. It's the Museum of Modern Art in Patchogue, Long Island. And this first image, in fact, it's the cover of the catalog. I don't know if you can even see any of it. It's the cover. And all the paintings in the show are in that museum show. So let me quickly go through the images, and then I'd love to hear from all of you. So when I thought about plants being burned to go up to God, I thought, wouldn't it be beautiful to see the individual leaves and the individual pieces as they go towards heaven? And I think of blue as Shemayim. I also think of it as water, but I felt like these were dancing nature going towards heaven. So let me go through these quickly, because I know we only have 15 minutes and I don't want to ever take anyone else's time. And I think I'm already going quickly. So this was another one. I thought about the, when the Kohanim had to, get rid of all the flesh, and then there were bones left. And I wanted to think about all the elements of the animals and how we have to give respect to those remainders of the animal, not the meat. Let's go to the next one. And this one, I think, Ysoscher, this was your favorite, and I was thrilled that you found one that related to you. And this was like the blood of the, I love what you said, Ysoscher. I don't know if you still remember what you said, but I'd rather you say it than me say it, because I love what you said, or you want me to talk?
Go ahead, Tobi. Tobi, go ahead.
All right. So you talked about the fact that red was so, it felt very blood-like. And I thought about, when you, if you know about plants, and there was just a beautiful study written about how we need bees in the world today so that we can have honey, and what honey does for everything. And now all plants, the areas that the bees come to, have to be beautiful and fragrant and all that. So the bees come to cross-pollinate. And I was looking at these plants that had these stamens and pistons, and I wanted them to be very alive and feel the intensity of their lives. Even though I do know plants are not people or animals, I wanted to have that feeling in there. We can go to the next one.
Those are the three.
Oh, that's the only three we picked. We didn't, because on the cover you had the three animal ones together. I love that you had picked that one. Oh, I didn't realize. So there was one that for our session you showed these three gold pieces. So then I can, I'd love to hear from all of you of what you think. I mean, we have another 3.5 minutes. I'd really like to hear if anyone has any questions or statements. In fact, we don't even have 3 minutes, but does anyone have any questions or anything?
As I've been following your work, Tobi, and I saw that you published with Alicia Kaplan last year.
Yes.
Appropriately titled Korbanot, offerings, in which you have a plethora of works depicting the notion of offering or sacrificing.
Right.
So you seem to be on a very Kohanic role here.
So I've been interested in this for over 30 years, and it was very amazing to work with a poet and hear how she and I come from very similar backgrounds, but have moved our lives in different directions. Yes, so I've done over 100 images based on Korbanot over the last 30 years. When I worked with Ysoscher, these are all new pieces that I did, and I was looking at one parsha. But yes, I'm happy that you brought up that book. It was a great joy to work on a book like that.
And certainly there's something so floral about this bloodletting in in this image, and maybe that is the whole point of the certain transmuting the gory blood into something beautiful.
By the way, that is what Ysoscher said, and that's so thank you for saying that. But I really that is how I felt this piece was. I wanted that beauty, but it also would feel very life-giving. But it looks like it's dancing. And someone asked me when they came to the studio, they said, "Did you think about Matisse when you were doing that?" And I said, "I think about everyone when I do anything." But once they said that, I remember the cutouts of Matisse late in his life. And I like the way the pieces separated from the front and the background. So all the paintings I do start as works on paper, and then they become smaller paintings. And now this is quite a large painting, and it's amazing to look at it, after a few months when Ysoscher and I were talking about it. Anyway, Devere, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to be part of this amazing program that you're doing, and looking at the Torah through artists' eyes with rabbis, I think is a gift to everyone. And I really want to thank you for doing that.
Thank you, Tobi. Thank you, Rabbi Ysoscher. The way your conversation flowed into bringing about all of these images, it was almost like a stream of each image brought out tons of Torah, and each Torah idea brought out so many interesting images.